Hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are listening or watching from. My name is JP. Welcome to Jump On Music UK, and this is Loop Lab Mondays. We're going to have a look at a couple of things today, and we're sitting at the desk, and the reason is because we're going to do a couple of extra things with a specific looper. Before we get going, though, I just have to say hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're from. Marvin is already chatting away. Great presentation, thanks. Just a couple of things, obviously, to get through. First of all, this live stream is sponsored. It's sponsored by our friends over at DistroKid. They are a music distribution company. So if you have songs that you're actually going to make and you want to put out there in the world, you have to send it to a music distributor so you can get it onto places like Spotify and Apple Music and places like that. So, DistroKid, they don't charge you for every release you do. They charge you for one price per year, and it starts at $22.99. And with the link that's on the screen and also that QR code, you get 7% off your first annual membership with them. It's like under $22, right? So you can release as much music as you want. You can release singles, you can release EPs, albums, anything you want to. So scan the QR code. It's also going to the chat as well. We are live on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitch, and Twitter as well. X. And obviously, if you want to obviously give that a click or give it a scan, that helps me out, obviously helps the channel out, but also it's going to help you if you're going to be releasing music in 2023 right up till September of 2024. Thank you very much for sponsoring this live stream, DistroKid. So, a couple of things as well. You may hear that noise a little bit. I'm a little bit of a cough, cold, getting into the autumn time. So there we go. So that QR code is going to be up in the top, in the corner there. There it is. So if you want to give that a scan, you're more than welcome to at any point during this live stream. And I'm also just letting people be aware of my beginner's course for looping. People ask me all the time, how do you get into looping? How do I start? And this is my beginner's course. And now the great thing is you actually can get 20% off with the code 20k subs. I actually extended that code because people were asking because of payday and things like that. So I'm extending it up until tonight. So you can get 20% off with 20k subs in the checkout. And then you can obviously learn about looping. This is my beginner's course for looping. I've got loads of different courses, including things like the RC-500 and lots of other ones as well. But today, what we're going to be looking at is we're going to be looking at a specific looper. I've been asked many, many times to do this on a live stream. And last week, we had a look at Loopy Pro, and a couple of questions were asked. This week, we are going to be having a look at the RC-500. Now, the great thing is, a couple of things I'm going to be talking to you about the RC-500. If you go, oh, well, I haven't got one of them. The great thing is, a lot of these processes, a lot of these things that I'm going to show you are actually, you can apply them to lots of different loopers. Hello, hope you're doing all well, and obviously you've got people coming into the stream now and saying hi. Let me know where you're from, let me know obviously whereabouts you are, and obviously Marvin was the first one to say hello. Good afternoon, Marvin, hope you're well. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at a couple of tricks of the RC-500, but we can actually apply this to lots of different loopers, and of course I've just whacked the camera there. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at a couple of things. Now I always get asked about things on the RC-500. I've got a lot of questions that always go into the comment section of my videos. So I'm going to pick a couple of things and a couple of questions. I've answered them in the chat. But obviously I want to let you guys know what we can do with it and how you can do with it, so you might not be aware of it. So just to give you a rundown, I'm going to switch over now. So I'm going to be in the corner over there, and then the RC-500 is going to come up on the screen. So there we go. Hi, I'm in the corner. This is the RC-500 Boss Loop Station, and then also what I have as well is a microphone going in at the back there. We've got a stereo going out, and then this little device is a WIDI jack, and this actually connects via Bluetooth. And I've got a Bluetooth pedal here, which is the Boss FS1WL 3-button pedal, so you can actually program it up with this to do more things. Don't worry about that for now. We're going to concentrate on this to begin with. And the other thing as well is this camera is doing lots of fun things with colours. So that is actually blue, even though it looks white on the screen. I'm just checking it. And that is red, even though it looks orange on the screen. But never mind. I'm going to get that fixed and we'll get that sorted soon. So if you are looking at obviously things like looping in general, this is why I have things like my course. But let's get going. Let's get into what we're talking about today. If you've got any questions for any kind of looping, this is Loop Lab Mondays, and what we do is... Sorry, I'll just bring myself back for a sec. This is Loop Lab Mondays, and what we do is, every Monday, as much as possible, we will answer looping questions, or we'll answer questions about live streaming, or we'll answer, but mainly looping. And people obviously want to ask loads of questions and too afraid to. Pop it in the chat. Bang it in the chat, and we'll have a chat about it, and we can go, you know, what's my favourite looper? You know, how to do something, or if you're stuck with something. That's the whole point of Loop Lab Mondays, to help you get unstuck, okay? But I want to show you some cool tips, tricks, techniques, as it were, and I hope you can all hear me okay there, so let me know if it's all good in the chart. As I say, we're live streaming on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitch as well, and obviously on the bird, known as Twitter, or as it's now known, X. I can't get used to that. But anyway, so what we've got here is we've got memory number 1, and I've just got it set up the way it normally is. I haven't done anything to these buttons. So this is record and play, this is stop, and this is track select. You have 2 tracks, so we've got track 1 here and track 2 there. The way you know which track you're on is 2 ways. We've got this is blinking away at us, so we know we're on track 1, and this is color coded. So red is track 1, and if I click this, it goes to blue. It looks white on the screen, but it is blue, trust me. And now that one's blinking, and that we're on now on track 2. So we can switch between the 2 tracks. The one thing that a lot of people don't realize is you can actually select both tracks together. And this is my first little tip. Without using anything like this. In fact, I'm going to move this out of the way for now. So we'll just concentrate on just the RC-500. And I'm going to put down a track. I'm going to put down just a quick loop. So this microphone is actually connected to the looper. So I'm just going to stop the background music while I do this. And I'm just going to add a couple of loops in, just a couple of things, just so we can get going. Now to stop each track, what you have to do is press stop and then pick track select and then press stop again. And that's fine, that's what most people do, and they're pedal dancing like crazy, and then of course you go in, right, stop each track. What people don't realize is if you hold down track select, just by default, if you've got it selected as track select, it goes from red or blue, it goes to pink. Like a pinky purpley colour, like that. And now what that does is it means you've selected both tracks at the same time. So if I hit play, it's going to play track 1, which was the drums, and track 2, which is the little sort of like vocals that I did. Here we go. And I can press stop. And they both stop together. So once I tap this, it's going to go back to the previous one. And you can see, just before I do that, you can see, obviously, this is purple. These two here are flashing together. Do you see that? So they're actually flashing together. So that means that both tracks are selected. If I just tap it again, it goes back to red. And see that way that flashed red then. I'll do that again. So if I hold that down, there you go, they both flash there, so then both being selected, and if I just give it one single tap, bang, then you're back on track 1. This is really handy, because what we can do is, if we're playing, let's just hold it down, we've got our tracks going, I'm going to stop it, and then I'm going to basically say start, and then I'm going to take it back to track 1 and take it out. So we're playing, and we're going. 1, 2, 3, 4. And now we can take track 1 out, and we can take track 2 out separately as well, and we can start them all separately as well, because we've got back to selecting a specific track. This is really handy, as I say, and you don't need any other additional pedals to say, oh, I want to stop both tracks together, or I want to start both tracks together. There is a dedicated stop-start on the RC-500 that you can change these pedals. And in fact, you can change these pedals to do anything you want to. So it depends on what you want to do, but you can actually change these how you like. You've got independent volume controls, of course, for each loop. So if we get both of them playing, I can just hold this down, and we can press play. So I can adjust the volume. And there's a nice little click. It kind of clicks into the middle. Let me just stop that there. There's a nice little click. It kind of clicks into the middle there. And that's meant to be basically where you'd normally sort of have it. Of course, you can push it further if you want to. But this is a really, really clever, nice, simple way where you can stop and start all tracks by holding this down for about 2 seconds. And if you get your timing right, you can hold this down maybe whilst you're playing the chorus. And then, of course, you can stop and start however you want. Nice little way of doing that, of course. Now, the way I've got these tracks set up is that they're actually set up to do a loop end. So if it's always going to go back to the beginning for track 1, because if I stop and there's nothing else playing, it's always going to play from the very, very beginning. Same with track 2. However, if you've got track 1 playing and then play track 2 or the other way around, then it will play. It's like muting it. So I hope that makes sense to everyone. Let me know if you find that useful. Let me know in the chat. It'll be really, really nice to hear from people. I hope you're all okay. As I say, I'm suffering a little bit of a cold at the moment, so you're going to hear the Ross cough, as it's known, and drinking lots of fluids. There we go. So the great thing about obviously doing Loop Lab Mondays is obviously you guys get to ask the questions that you think, oh, maybe I should have asked this question, like, or I should have put it, in a comment under the video, and you can ask me right now. You can ask me anything you want to about looping. You can also ask about how I do live streaming, how I do this. I can show you how I do this, no problem at all. And with Loop Lab Mondays, obviously we're going to do this every Monday, which is real fun and real good, which means that you guys get a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of something out of it, which I hope you do, and it's all good. Australia Ray is in the house. Hi, JP. Get well soon. Oh, thanks, buddy. Yeah, just weird because it's really warm. I think because it's really warm and wet, basically, in the UK. It's just caught onto my throat and my nose, but there we go. But the show must go on, mustn't it, Ray? So there we go. But yeah, the great thing is if you've got things like an RC5, an RC-500, an RC-600, an RC-300, there's things you can do with this that you apply to this as well. So no problem at all. You can even do this with the 505, and there's lots of things you can do. Obviously, there's lots of different ways you can bring stuff in. Now, this microphone I'm using right now, this is the Aston Stealth microphone, this one right here. And this is a microphone that can be both a condenser and a dynamic microphone. But to make sure that there's enough volume going in, I've turned it on as a condenser microphone. And in order to do that on the RC-500, what you need to do is you need to go to input, and the very first thing there is literally phantom power on, and you can turn it on or off. There's always been a bit of a thing about the volume input on the RC-500 that some people are like, it's not loud enough. It's really sort of the curve on it, or the curve on the actual audio is really difficult. So it's one of those things where, what is my camera doing? As soon as I put my hand up, you can actually see the screen, but as soon as I take my hand away, it goes nuts. What's going on? Weird. I need to sort this out. But anyway, so yeah, so then that was the first kind of thing. People were asking about, how do I do an all start stop? Well, the problem is that people don't want to actually change these buttons too much. Certainly if you're changing them like per memory, or you want to change it for the whole system. So the great thing is if you hold that down, you get the purple option, and you can just go start and stop for both of them. It's really nice. But one of the questions I got was, can I have a fade? Can it fade out? And yes, you can fade it out. In order to do that though, I'm trying to do this so you can see what I'm going to do on the screen. Going on, it's weird. What we can do is we need to go into the actual system itself. So if we go into the system and we actually go into memory, there's record options, you've got play options, you've got loop effects, and then you've got rhythm, and then you've got control, and then all the different controls. You've got all the different assigns, and at the end, you've got name. So I'm going to move my hand over here, and hopefully you should, I'm hoping you'll be able to see this. No, it's dead weird. There we go. So play options. So if you go into play options, the first one is it going to be multi or is it going to be single? So this is basically if you're going to use the loops together or if you're going to use them as a verse and a chorus. And then we've got single change immediate. So if you're actually going to change it in single mode, will it change immediately? I like to have it at loop end because loop end is a great option where you press it, it waits for the first loop to finish, and then it jumps over to the next loop at the end of that first loop, which is great because you don't really have to think about timing, you just press it. Then you've got the level. Then you've got fade time. So there is a fade there, and you can see it says fade time, 2 measures. And then you've got all start all, track chain parallel. And then if we go out of it and go into record, you've got overdub, record overdub, quantize, and everything else like that. So, and then you've got loop length, and because we've already recorded something. So people go, oh, hang on a minute, it said fade there. Why can't I find the fade? And that's because we need to actually go to these two. These two are menus for the individual tracks. You can see it says edit underneath each one. And people go, oh, I need to go into the memory of this track because that's where the fade is. It's not, it's here. So if we go into here, we've got track 1, first of all, reverse, no, loop effects on, one shot on, level, pan, and then we get to track 1 start. How do you want it to start? Well, I want it to start immediately, but how do you want it to stop? And this is where your fade is. So we can actually click on here and say immediate or fade out, or just go to the end of the loop and stop. So then that's quite useful sometimes. You want to press it and then it'll just carry on and it'll go bump at the end of the loop. So this is where your fade is. Fade out. Now that's on track 1. Little top tip for you, if you want to do it for track 2, instead of going all the way out of all the menus, we just press track 2 right now, and we're in the same menu for track 2. We're actually in the same place, and we can just jump between them really quickly. So if I click that, we go fade out. Now what we can do is we can actually go over and have a look at, we've got the measure and everything else, and that's fine. But if we then go back into memory and we go into play options, you remember there's a fade time and it says 2 measures. So let's make it 4 measures long. So what we'll do is, let me just turn this background music off again. And then what we'll do is we'll start the loop, which will start immediately, which is great. And then when we hit stop, I'm going to go to the purple one to do stop all. And then when we do that, they'll fade out. So hold that down. And you can see it's flashing. That's because they're fading out. Nice and simple. So therefore, it faded out and then it stopped. It stopped it, ready to go, ready to be pressed again straight away. So utilizing our first tip, which was using this, where you hold this down, you get the purple option for track select, and then using this for fade out, this makes it really, really handy. Now, the downside of this is basically you're unable to stop. Right, you want to stop instantly. Well, that's not true, because what you can do, if we actually just pick, let's just pick the first one, we can actually, it'll fade out every time, but if we double tap the stop button, that will stop it instantly. So if I stop now, it'll start fading. But if I tap it a second time, it stops, which is great because even if it's fading a little bit, you could still stop it in time. So if you wanted to, so if I go, and it's up to you, obviously, when you stop it. So you've still got that option there of tapping it and it'll fade, and then tap it a second time, and then you're actually going to stop it permanently, which is fine. So I hope that helps with obviously going into the edit for fade, and obviously we've got the option here for selecting both tracks at the same time. Now the downside of all of this is that you've actually got to hold things down for well, certainly with the track select, you've got to hold down for a good 2 seconds before it will actually go into the purple mode. This is where we can do one of 2 things. We can either change the buttons on the RC-500, or you can introduce more buttons. Now, this is a Bluetooth option. You've also got, I put that well out of reach, didn't I? You've also got, obviously, a wired option. So with things like the FS6, the FS7 is the one I use on my pedal board. It's basically an FS6, but just obviously smaller. So instead of pressing 1 and 2, you kind of like pressing 1 and 2 up on top. I can't get it at the moment. It's kind of like velcroed in. But you can obviously go wireless if you want to. It depends on how many buttons you need. And this is a real question that keeps getting asked all the time. Like, oh, I need to upgrade from the 500 to the 600. And I had a comment literally saying, I don't need any more than 2 tracks. Well, then you don't need the 600. But I want effects. Well, go and get an effects processor and bring it in. And that's what I did, and I used to do that for years. So I had the TC Helicon Voice Live Play Acoustic. I had the Voice Live Touch. I had a big, and I literally would go into the RC-30. That's it. That's all it would need, because I just need the 2 tracks either for a beat and some harmonies or the chord structure of the song, or I'd have it as a verse and a chorus. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to bring this back up. And we've now, obviously, we've got that option there always, that we hold it down 1, 2, yeah, it's about 2 seconds. It takes a little bit of a while. If you think about it in a live performance, you have to hold that down, and then, you know, you've got to pre-think that even before you press a button. Then what you can do is you can obviously bring in another button, and what you can do is you could have a dedicated start, stop, all, as opposed to have to press that and then press start and stop on these. And that's what we've got here. So if I actually just press this to play, so I can actually press that straight away, and then I can have that on the side over here or over there. And the great thing is, of course, there's no wires. So the WIDI jack is plugged in. And then this is actually got, I've done 3 videos about this now, and it's got an instrument Bluetooth and a computer Bluetooth, and you put it into either MIDI or you put it in, oh sorry, other way around. You either put it into MIDI or you put it into HID, which is keystrokes. So if you've got things like Loopy Pro, you could do either on this, but then you can still plug in, I can still plug in an FS6 into here and have 2 more buttons, so I could have actually 5 buttons, and then you got 6, 7, 8. You suddenly got 8 buttons to play with. And the great thing with the 500, the RC5, the 600, the 505 Mark II, you can personalize what all of these buttons are. And I think that's really, really powerful. And it depends obviously on what you need and how you want to play. What you play and what style you play, it totally depends. But what's going on here? There we go. There we go. Have you gone white again? You have, haven't you? Let's see if it can focus on there instead. Focus on my mouse. It's not doing it. Never mind. So I got loads of questions obviously about this, about having an effect and having a fade. Fading isn't actually part of the effects on this, and you have got effects built into these, and it depends on what you want effects wise. And I keep bumping the camera, I'm really sorry. One sec. There we go. So yeah, it depends on what you need, but I think one of the things is that this combination is really, really good, because you're able to then add a couple of different bits and bobs. So on that basis, then what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at a couple of questions that have been asked in on lots of different videos, but all about the 500. And the first one was about basically saying, hello, I do have a 500 and I've been using a line 6 for a long time. There was a stop at loop end switch at default, and you had to stop in different modes. And what you can do is you basically press track 1 and you can scroll to stop, and obviously you have immediate, you have fade, and what you also have as well is you have loop end. And loop end's really, really handy. Hi Bruce, how we doing? You okay? So we can actually do these different things where if I press here, let me just do that. So there we go. Whoa. You're gonna focus, sort of. I'm glad you're well, mate. So yeah, so we can actually go into track 1, and at the moment we're on track 1 reverse. I realise the screen isn't showing like this properly, but you got loop effects, and we'll get to loop effects later. One shot, and then we've also got level, and then we've got pan, we've got start immediate, and then stop. So the options for stop you've got are immediately, we can stop straight away, straight immediately, we can fade out, or we can go loop end. Loop end's really handy. I think it's one of those things that's a bit underutilized, if I'm honest. So I've done that for track 1. I'm going to do this for track 2 as well. Let's go to loop end. So now if we actually start everything, I'm on track 1 right now. That's flashing. I know it's red. Stopped it. And it stopped at the end of its loop because I can see that on the display. If we go to track 2, press stop. It hasn't stopped yet. It's going to get to the end. And there you go, it's stopped. So you can use that really, really easily. But then, of course, if you want to stop things instantly, then, of course, you could double tap and do something like that. It's totally up to you. The other thing as well is if we go through this menu's got loads inside it. So we start off with track 1 reverse on or off, and you can use one of the buttons to have a reverse if you want to. So for things like drums and stuff, you can get some cool effects. So if I was to actually turn that on, that was the right one. There we go. There we go. At the moment, what I'm doing, I'm just switching this, obviously, with the control knob there, but you could obviously have a button to say effect, go into reverse, go out of reverse. That's the first one. The next one is track 1 loop effects on, and we're going to get into the effects in a minute. You can affect the loop. So there are effects to affect the loop. And you can obviously do that, no prob. You can affect different things, and there's a couple of different effects we'll go into in a sec. You've then also got track 1 one shot, and this is something again slightly underutilized, where what you can do is you can still loop and everything, but what I could do is I could say, well, I want track 2 to just be a one shot. So I'm going to do that on track 2. We'll do that now. Sorry, I'm just switch this over. And then what we'll do is we'll go to track 1 and make sure that's on one shot. No, it's not. Cool. All right. So what we've done is I've put track 2 on one shot only. And the great thing about that is it means you just have to imagine the track 2 is just your chorus, and you just want it to play once and then shut up again. Then you can do that, no problem. So track 1's playing. We'll get up to the chorus. Now, did you hear the difference? It was out of sync. And the reason for that is because one shots don't actually sync with the loop. So you have to be really careful with one shots. But what you can do is we can obviously go into it. 1, 2, 3, and watch. And that's it. It only plays once. It's exactly what you want. Now, you have to, I say, be careful with it, because you could obviously hit it at the wrong time. Maybe you miss. Maybe you hit it with your foot a little bit early, and it all sounds a bit off. So one-shots are quite good if you just want to, obviously, one-shot something. But just be aware that that one-shot is not synced to the BPM of the loop. So if we go back in now, and we go back to one-shot, and we turn that off, and then we go into this track, and we press the track 1. That's completely in sync. I pressed it a little bit early just to... There we go, completely in sync. And there we go. So just be aware of that. If you use one shot, obviously it's going to be out of sync with the loop. So you need to be aware of that, because of course it can mess up your loop. It can mess up your performance. You've got the track 1 level. Now if I move this, it will actually move itself anyway. There we go. You can sort of see it there. If I move that, I don't know what's going on where it focuses on my hand, but anyway. So 200 to 0, and the click in the middle is 100. It's not percentage. Boss have always done this. They've always gone up to 200 as opposed to 0 to 100. Don't know why. They just do. And then obviously having it as 200 there. It's not 0 dB or anything like that. It's just between 0 and 200. They just decided to do that. That's the way it is. You've also got pan as well, and again, another thing that's completely underutilized. One thing that's really, really cool, certainly if you're doing it in stereo, is if you've got a stereo option where maybe you're playing at a venue that's got a full PA, then you can actually pan your loops slightly, which is quite nice because you could pan the drums slightly to one side or beatboxing to one side, and then you could pan your harmonies at the other side, and then you're still singing in the middle. So it actually gives it a bit of a wider spectrum. Most people just leave it in center. It's quite nice to actually maybe pan it a little bit. If you know that you're always going to be on track one, you're going to be doing a beat or something, you could always do that. And remember, this is on the memory. This is actually, you could change this afterwards on a different memory. We've gone obviously through this track one start. The other one is actually fade in, and you can actually fade things in, which is quite nice. Certainly if you're doing stuff that's got like a drone to it, which is really, really cool. And then we've obviously gone through this stop option. So we've got loop end, fade out, and immediate. I'm just going to put these back to immediate while we carry on for the live stream. Then you've got measure. Now, with this loop, because it's already been put down, track one, that's gone right, that's one measure. Therefore, track two is two measures because it's twice as long. That makes sense. When you start getting into doing looping with an RC-500, a lot of people have said, well, when I've done the loop and then I do the track two loop, it's like when I press stop and then start again, it's not on bar one, beat one. It's like halfway through, or it's like on like bar 3 of 4 when it should be on bar 1 of 4. And this is all down to how many revolutions the very first track has done. So if you are just using a track, going track one, like 1 bar, 1 bar, 1 bar, 1 bar, and then you suddenly put 4 bars down, it goes, well, I did that 3 times, so the 4th time is when we kick in. So you have to be aware of how many revolutions track 1 has done before you hit record. Now, I know that's a pain in the bum, but that is how it's built. But you have to be aware of that. Now, you can put these into auto, you can put these into free. The alternative you can do is you can actually erase all these loops, and then you can say how many measures that actually is. So you can say, well, I want that to be 3 bars long, and I want the other one to be 6, or I want this to be 2 and 4, whatever you want it to be, or you can do as many as you want. And then what you've got is you've got T1 loop S on, and that's loop stop, basically. You got tempo, loop sync, apologies. The cold. So track 1 loop sync on, and then you've also got tempo sync. So you've got 2 different things here. Loop sync is syncing the loops together, and then tempo sync is making sure that loop is synced to the tempo of the track. So if we then start using the tempo, which again we'll get into in a bit, then it's going to be in time. So now that's ready. We've got me beatboxing, and we've got the rhythm as well. So we've got them there. Now because I've used it, you can see that tempo on and off is flashing because it's going, oh, you wanted me to go again. So you have to, if you don't want to use it, you have to turn it on and off. And this is one of the other questions as well. Do you have to, I've put a backing track down, but the beat always comes back in. So you need to make sure it's off and then write that to the memory. And then that way it will stay off. If it's like that, where they're both flashing, then that means it's ready to be, it's armed, it's ready to be used. So as you hit a loop, no matter which loop it is, the rhythm will start as well. So if I go into that, if I go into that and then do that, I have to turn it on and turn it off again for a second. Now it's like that, it will not start. The tempo is off. So it's just a switch, just an off switch, which is really, really useful. Where were we up to? Oh yeah, tempo sync. Track 1 input. So you can actually say, well, I've got a microphone and a guitar. I only want track 1 to have the guitar. So you can, it has all by default. So you can mic in, instrument A or instrument B. So you can split it. It is a stereo in, but you don't have to have it as stereo. So if you've got a keyboard, you can plug both in and maybe it's just the instrument. Or maybe you've got a guitar and a bass, but you can say, well, I only want instrument A, which is the guitar, because instrument B is the bass. And then you can say mic and instrument, which I think is really weird because all is pretty much the same. But anyway, there we go. And remember, everything I'm showing you about this is duplicated on track 2 as well. So Same for the output. Do you want the output? And this is where people get really confused. And I just want to take a moment to actually explain this. When people get really confused, I get so many questions about, I've put the audio as this and I've put the audio as that, and I can still hear the loops. What's going on? So what you need to remember is you've got the routing of your instruments, the routing of your microphone, and the routing of the loops. So just because you've done the routing of the instruments, it doesn't mean that that's going to route the loops at all. In fact, it won't. You need to change it in here. So you need to go into track 1 and you need to go into input if you're doing routing. So if I want the guitar to go over to a guitar amp, for example, and I don't want my vocals to go through the guitar amp, so I'd say, well, I want, let's just say my guitar input is input A, and then I want track 1 to be out A, and that's fine. Therefore, only out A is going to be input A, if that makes sense. But then you need to do that in the inputs as well and say, well, only that is going into that looper. So imagine, you've got to remember these are two loopers that are tied together. And then you can have all out A, out B, and that's it. And then you've got, I think that's the end of it. Yeah, that's the output. So that's the last one on here. And then everything's duplicated for track 2. So you just need to make sure that you've got all those sat there and ready to go. Now then, I'm going to take a slurp of my drink, but before I do that, I just need to do one or two things. First of all, this live stream is sponsored. It's sponsored by our friends over at DistroKid. If you don't know who DistroKid are, then you've probably never seen a live stream by me, because I always talk about them. DistroKid are a music distribution company, and they are basically the people you give your songs to. And then what they do is they push it out to all the places like Spotify, Amazon, Apple Music, all these different places. But they also push it out to things like social media sites like Facebook, Instagram, and even TikTok. So if if you have your music out there, then people can use your music as your reels, including you. So if you want to promote your own music, you can do that, and you get paid for it, which is crazy. They do loads of other things as well, where once you actually release a track, even if it's not out yet, what it does is it creates what's called a hyperfollow page. So a hyperfollow page is where you have one link, and you send people to that link, and that's your single or your EP or your cover or your album, and then they choose which service they want to listen to it on, whether that's going to be Spotify or Apple Music. And then we have this link that's under here, and with that link you get 7% off signing up to DistroKid. So if you're going to be releasing music in the autumn, the winter, the spring, and then next summer, then you've got an option here where you can actually do it for an entire year for basically under $22. I mean, how much is a pack of strings for a guitar these days? I'll tell you, it's about 15, 16 quid in the UK. So for less than 2 packs of strings, you can release as much music as you want to, which is really, really good. And these guys obviously sponsor the channel, and thank them very much for that. Of course, if you click that link, that helps me out as well at no additional cost to you. In fact, we're saving you money. So that QR code that has just obviously gone into the chat down there is also that QR code up there. There it is. That one. And then you can obviously scan it and sign up to DistroKid, and then that way basically you can start releasing as much music as you want to. DistroKid even have a couple of arms. They've got a thing called Mixia. I literally used it this morning, which is a mastering service, because we're mastering a new track, I just wanted to see what it sounded like. We're not there yet, but the great thing is you can master as much as you want for $99. That's a separate service they do, but it is an amazing piece of kit. So thank you very much to DistroKid for sponsoring this live stream. Now then, boop. There we go. I'm a bit slower than I normally am today, mainly because this cold. Anyway, so the other thing I wanted to let people be aware of is obviously this is Loop Lab Mondays. Loop Lab Mondays is all about obviously letting you answer the questions if you want to. Ask the questions if you know the answer. Then obviously ask the questions about looping if people are asking, but of course I'm here to help as well. So Loop Lab Mondays is here for that. But the other thing as well is that if you want to take your first steps into looping, or maybe you've done looping for a little bit, but you want to just go that little bit further, I do a course all about looping right from the very beginning, which is called Master the Basics. And I did, for going over 20,000 subscribers, I did a 20% off, which is with the code 20k subs. And it ended on the 3rd of September, and I've extended it until today because people asked me. So it literally is until today, and you're going to get 20% off that. It's normally $97. It's a lifetime payment, which means that basically if you get it, and I suddenly add a load of content into that looping course, and I add content as things go on, you get it for no extra charge. It works on every platform, PC, Mac, it works on your phone, it works on a tablet, and it's all videos, and you can comment under the videos as well. So if you comment on the videos, it's like commenting under a YouTube channel, but we're talking directly, so it's a little bit more personal. So for those who have already got it, thank you very much. Had some great feedback already, and there's some things that people have asked to be added, and that's going to be added soon. So have a look at the course, scan the QR code, that's gone in the chat as well. And yeah, that's Master Basics. Enjoy, but the 20% off will go at midnight in the UK. So I tell you what we'll do. We will do 7 a.m. tomorrow in the UK, which will work out around midnight somewhere in the US. So if you're watching this on the replay, then we'll do that, obviously, and give you 20% off until that point. But literally by tomorrow morning, it will go. So I'm letting you know that now. Right. I need to have a drink. How is everyone, by the way? Everyone's a bit quiet today. Hope you're all okay. So there we go. If you've got questions, obviously, about looping, that's exactly what we're here for. Put it in the chat, and I'll answer it. It's as simple as that. The other thing as well is that it's pretty apparent and pretty obvious to everyone that I use one specific looper for my gigs, which is the Boss RC-600 loop station. That is my main looper, but I do go out with this setup, which I really love now. Certainly if you go into things like an open mic night, these two together just gives you a bit more flexibility, and it's a great piece of kit, and you can customize it how you want. However, having said all that, there is a looper that has not had any love whatsoever, and it's sitting in this room right now, and the poor thing's crying, which is the Headrush looper board. The Headrush looper board I had way before the Boss RC-600, because of course it was out before then. And I'm announcing today that basically I'm going to let it go. I'm not actually going to be using the Headrush looper board anymore. I will be getting rid. I will be selling. So obviously, if you're watching on the replay and you're in the UK and anyone wants to get a Headrush looper board, then get in contact with me. My email address is on the YouTube channel, or go to my Instagram page, which is John Paul Music UK, and give me a dum. I know it's not meant to be said like that. Anyway, all the socials are at John Paul Music UK if you want to have a look. Right, now, next. Let's go back over to this. Now, I brought this back in because, as I say, we can actually do some fun, funky things with this. So I'm going to erase this loop now, and the fastest way for me to erase this loop is you can actually hold down on here, make it go pink, and then you can sort of like do it. But what I'm going to do is I'm literally just going to go down a memory and then up a memory, and then that will wipe it because I've not saved it, and I've not saved it at all. Now it's gone back to blue, which means there's nothing on there, and it's ready for a new track again. But before we get into that, and we get into these, what I'm going to do is I'm going to program this up in a couple of different ways. Now I can change these, and I've got a memory on here. I think it's memory 5. Is it memory 5? No, it's memory 3. So I've actually got a memory here where that's track 1, that's track 2. And so you can actually change it. And then track select is turned into something else. But you have to remember that, and that's the hard bit about it. So it's quite nice to obviously have it the way you want and then add things to it than trying to change these for every single song. The only major reason why you change these is if you're going to go from like a verse to a chorus. And again, you can do that without changing the buttons, or you can change the buttons so that's the verse, that's the chorus, and that's stop and play. You can do it that way, for example. But the reason for these ones is obviously a couple of different things. So we could have an undo. If you do an undo on here, you have to hold record play down, and an undo takes about 2 seconds. We can have an undo for track 1, an undo track 2, and then you start stop here. And that's exactly how I've got this set up. This is how I gig with it. So let's put another thing down. And that's something else I need to talk to you about. I forgot about that. So out the box, when you hit record play, when you hit record and then you hit it again, it goes into play mode. What I've done is I've actually set this up so it goes record overdub. So it doesn't go into play, it goes overdub. How you do that is you go into track 1 here, and then you scroll across. I'm lying to you. You go into memory, go into record, and then you've got dub mode, overdub. So you can see there it says overdub, replace, and then you've got record action. That's the one, sorry. Again, it's this cold that made me forget things. Record action. So out the box, record action will be record play. Hopefully you can see that there. There you go, record play. And then if you change it over to record dub, it means it'll go straight into overdub. Anyway, just wanted to let you be aware of that. So there we go, we've got our 2 tracks, and did you see what I did there? I literally just pressed that button. So this is all start stop. Now, people go, well, where's the all start stop on here? And how do you get these, or how do you get an FS6 to control it? Now, if you plug in an FS6 into the back, which if I just very carefully do this, there is an option here for control 1, 2, or expression. So if you plug an FS6 into there, you have MIDI or Bluetooth, then how do you actually change this? So what you need to do is you need to go into menu, and when we go into menu, we've got options for different things. Now this one is menu for MIDI, and that's fine, and we can actually go into the MIDI, and it gets quite complicated there. But if we go into menu, you've got options for control. So let me just do that again so you can see it. Let's do that. So there we go. So if I go into memory on the button here, we go into memory, and then you've got record, play, loop effects, rhythm, control, and then you've got 8 assigns, and then you've got name. Now, control is literally, oops, there we go, control. So control is how do I control it? Think of it like that. So as in the buttons and the buttons that you plug in. So we've got this one, this one, this one. We've got the option of either 2, like these 2, and obviously A and B there. Or instead of that, you can have an expression pedal. So that's quite useful to have an expression pedal because you can have, like, you control the volume of the loops if you want it to. So pedal 1 is this. Pedal 2 is this one. Pedal 3 is that one, track select. And then you've got control 1, undo, redo. Control 2, I had it down as all start. And then expression is memory level. So you can have it as memory level. So how on earth do I connect these? Well, this is actually all done through assigns. And then because we've got this pumping out MIDI at all times, which is the WIDI jack. The WIDI jack's fabulous, by the way. And they do another one, which is if you want to plug in, I've got it just here, hang on a sec. If you want to plug in sort of a keyboard that's an older keyboard and you want to use it for, this is the one which is the WIDI Master, and then you plug that in and that'll just give you Bluetooth. So you could record using a keyboard by Bluetooth into an iPad, for example, or an iPhone, which is really clever, and that's a really good way to run GarageBand or even Logic Pro on iPad. Really, really clever. So how do I get these in? Well, because we've got this up and running, we need to come out of here, and then we actually go from control to assign. Now, this is where the app for this becomes really, really powerful, because you need to know what these 3 are doing. So I've actually got this set up as CC numbers. So this is CC80, 81 and 82, and then what we do is we can go into assigned. So if I go into assign, we've got assign number 1. You need to make sure it's switched on, and then there we go, and then we got the source, and the source is what number. So I've got this down as CC80, which is this one right here, and then I've noticed if I cover this, it kind of shows you the screen. Scroll across. Source mode is either moment or toggle, so either on or off. I've got it at moment at the moment. And then the target is what do you want it to do. So I've actually got this one down as track 1, undo, redo. So I've got the, if I scroll that, some of them have like a minimum and a maximum. I've just seen what you said, Ray. That's a good question. How do you get the FS6 to work if your battery is flat? Well, you can get it still to work, but it just means that it won't light up. But it will still work. But I would really recommend put that battery in. Some of them have a target minimum maximum for things that are just like turn on, turn off. It doesn't. So that's the first one. So that's the sign 1. So I'll show you what that does. So we've got our track here, which is track 1. Now I went boom, right? It's gone. And I didn't have to hold it down for 2 seconds either. You just press it. Really, really handy. If I press it again, it comes back straight away. So instead of actually, it's much faster to then just press that dedicated button than having to hold down for 2 seconds. And you can do it, no prob. But obviously, if you utilize undo, redo a lot, which I do, and I utilize it from a song structure point of view, then you can obviously then do that. Now, exactly the same for the other one. I did assign number 2 as track 2 undo redo. So if we press track 2, there's now only one voice. Put that other voice back. I wasn't very clean on that one, but never mind. And then this one is all start stop. So the way you have a look at this one, I wanted to actually dedicate a little bit of time to all start stop, because people ask me I'd probably say every week now, where is all start stop, or can you have an all start stop in the RC-500? Yes, you can. And if we go into it and go into memory, let me go to my assign number 3. It's on. I'll just cover this over so you can see it. Source is 82, which is this button. And this moment, and then what is the target? It's all start. I really wish, and I hope in a firmware update, Boss can change that to just say all S/S or something like that, or start/stop, because it is stopping both at the same time, but it does stop as well as start. And you can be pretty quick with it. So yeah, so that's the actual all start stop, and that's how I've got this set up. Now I can plug into here Control 1, 2 and expression if I wanted to, and I actually use 1, 2, 3 more assigns on here, but you've also got a Control 1, 2 here, so that wouldn't take up any more assigns because you've got a dedicated Control 1, 2. So I'd probably prefer to plug an FS6 into here, and then maybe just plug the expression into there, and you could still plug stuff into that, and so you could have 1, 2, 3, 2 FS6, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So you got 10 buttons and an expression pedal. So people go out and buy things like, obviously, that you've got like a big MIDI board, soft steps, FCB 1010s, things like that. You don't necessarily need that when you've got this, because this expands it anyway. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 buttons, and then 5, 6, 7, 8. And then you've got 2 on the back, which is 10, and then you've got your expression there. Now, the other thing with this one is it's still got MIDI out, so these run on batteries, which is great. And by the way, since having this, I've not changed the batteries once. It runs forever. It's crazy. You've got the USB as well, but the USB is really for firmware, but you can use it with for doing things with a computer more than anyway. But yeah, but I prefer it to be that. You can DC it in as well. So if you're on a pedal board and you just want to grab this is really nice and tidy, to be honest. So if you want to grab this, but you want to use the batteries, but you want to put this on a pedal board permanently, you can do, and you can just DC it in. Don't worry about the batteries. So really, really useful, really clever piece of kit. You can use this for page turning. So you could press something. So maybe that's your next page, whilst this is your undo and redo and all start stop. On this, you could have this for page turning your iPad, for example. So you could send a different CC number to something else on a different MIDI channel, which is really clever. And this is where it gets a bit complicated, but also where you can really up your level with just this setup. And if you bring in like a phone or a tablet, you can then turn around and say, well, that's my page to go to my next set of lyrics or something like that. You can do things like that. The key for that is to make sure that that's being sent on a different MIDI channel to these. So it's not on MIDI channel 1, it's on MIDI channel 2 or 6 or 18. Not 18, there's only 16 really. But basically you can do it that way. Now, one thing I want to do is, I know I've just put it on myself and I'm not even looking at you, as I said to you before, I get loads of comments about the RC-500. What can the RC-500 do? Obviously, you can do things like this with a 600. I've got 21 buttons and an expression pedal set up on my RC-600. And that's it, because it's got 9 buttons and you've got 3 modes. Are you telling me you've got 21 additional buttons on top of that? That's impressive if you have. That's really, really cool. So the other thing as well is obviously if you're using things like a backing track, and I did a video about the RC5 quite a while ago about how to actually use it as a backing track machine as opposed to a looper. So you're using it almost in one-shot mode. The downside of one-shot mode, of course, as you saw, is obviously it's not synced to the BPM or it's not synced to the loops. If you wanted to loop it, you'd have to be either really bang on time, really good with that, or what you'd have to do is you'd have to sync it in a certain way. So the big one for backing tracks with things like this is if I say the phrase unsupported file type. Oh no, 21 all up. Okay, so it's just 21 all up. That's fine. That's cool. Whoops, there we go. So the big one is unsupported file type. I see this a lot. And people trying to put stuff into an RC500 that then they've done it on a certain way. Now, the 500 can take certain things, and it can take predominantly WAV. So as long as it's a WAV file, use the RC Tone Studio and make sure it's the RC one. So therefore you can import and export files as you see fit. However, there's certain ones where if it's like a certain kilohertz frequency and things like that, it just won't take it. So you have to make sure and go to the support page and it'll tell you the different ones it can accept. Now, the great thing about these things is the RC5, 500, 600 and the 505 Mark II is that they are 32-bit float. The engine inside is 32-bit, but it will accept 16 and 24 as well. However, you are going to notice the difference if you've got a backing track that's in 16. Start recording on. There is sort of a bit of a sound quality, not issue, but I would say difference, where you can actually hear the difference between these two. So let's swap this around. There we go. That's better. I don't know why. I just like being on this side. That side. Anyway, so there is a bit of a difference between them. You can start hearing it. So if your digital audio workstation, if you're making backing tracks, if you're able to do it in 32-bit, I would really recommend doing it. Certainly if you really hear the difference in like a big PA system, if you've got your backing tracks that you can export out as 32-bit, you're going to hear a massive difference when it comes to this pumping it out in a certain way. Now, of course, your backing tracks, in inverted commas, are simply loops. They're either going to be looped or they're one-shots. So you can, of course, then say, well, track 1's the backing track, and I want track 2 to be a solo or a loop that I play over the top. And then you get a situation where you hit it and then it's just a bit of a millisecond out. And maybe it's because you've got a like just before it kicks in. So things like that you have to really take into consideration. The alternative is, of course, you can always put like maybe a 4/4 click before the track starts, so it is bang on, bar one, beat one, and therefore when you loop with the second track, then it's going to be in time. Another option is, or another problem is that people turn around and say, well, I've imported it in and it's say 120 beats per minute and it's coming up as 60. That's not too much of a worry unless you want to use the rhythm track, because as long as you do the loop in the right amount of bars that you want to, it doesn't really matter. Now, one thing you can do is you can actually save the tempo of the memory and then you can tell it to ignore the loop, as it were, but it kind of is the right tempo, as it were. So as you hit it, it kind of plays and it's playing at the right BPM. There's loads of different ways you can do this. There's loads of different things you can do with this little loop station, and it's really, really powerful and really, really worth picking up if you've never picked one up before. If you've never picked any of them up before, I always get the question as well, what looper should I go for? Now, that's obviously a question I do answer in my course, and that is a nice little segue to my course. But you can obviously go into the course. But I will answer this. It all depends on what kind of looping you're doing. If you're doing looping where you need it to be... I need to have a bass looped, I need vocals looped, I need the guitar looped, I need a brass section looped, and it's all got to be in separates. Then you're going to need a pretty big looper. You're going to need things like the Headrest Looper Board, or even Loopy Pro, or you're going to need like a 5 or 6 track looper, the 505, the 600, something like that. The other question is that if you're looping, it's just you, a guitar, and a microphone, and you just want to mess around with adding loops to your stuff, a 500's fine for what most people need. An RC-30 is fine for what most people need. The 500's just got some great functionality, and I would highly recommend get the 500 over the 30, simply for the audio engine on its own, just for the audio quality now. And for the price that you're paying as well, you'll find that you'll get a lot more for your money getting a 500, because you can customize it later, expand like we've been doing this afternoon. One sec. Right then. I'm not sure how long we're going to last, because obviously this cold is affecting my throat and nose, but the show must go on, as they say. So I hope you guys are all okay, and we're going to be obviously exploring lots of things about the 500, but these things can be applied to a couple of other loopers as well. Now, here's a good question. Can you save one track whilst playing another? So the person was asking, can we save the track and then go up to a different memory and then come back down a memory and then use it that way? Or can we save it whilst playing? And the answer is you can hit right. So let's do this right now. So we're playing right now. Let me bring the 500 in so you can see it. So track one's playing. I am going to get to the effects, and I'm going to get to this display as well, because I want to talk about it, because it is quite special. So we hit exit and enter together. We're going to write it. We're going to write to the memory, press enter. It says stop all. I don't know if you can see that there. There you go. Stop all. Big message. So the answer is no, you can't. You can't write to the memory and then carry on. Now, you can write to the memory obviously beforehand, and then I could write this now and then press play. But if I play this and then just try and write to the memory, we get this big stop all. You must stop the track before you carry on. The weird thing is, on the RC-600, you can do that, because the brain inside it is much bigger, and the processor is much bigger as well. So it's able to do it. But the question is, can you save one track while playing another? Now, the answer is, in short, is no, but you have 2 tracks. So if you're looking to just basically make a track and then go over to another track and do something else, then yes, no problem at all. And then at the end of that song, you could save it so you could bring it back. I've seen someone do one thing at a gig where they put a loop down, and then what they did was, whilst they stopped the loop completely, while still playing, hit right to the memory, and then carried on after that, so they could actually go to something else and bring it back. That's very difficult, and I think that's very niche as well. So the answer is no, you can't, not on an RC-500. It'd be great if it could, because you could save, go to a different memory, and have 2 tracks like for a verse and 2 tracks for a chorus, so you could split it up, and then they'd be quite useful. But unfortunately, that is the one where we have to say, no, you can't. Where was that other one? Ah, yes. Now, the RC-500 and the RC-5 as well have MIDI, and they have TRS MIDI. What that means is basically the connection. So instead of having that big 5-pin circular, it is the small little jacks there, as you can see just there, 5-pin MIDI in and out. That's why I'm using the WIDI jack as opposed to the WIDI master, because then that way you can just plug it straight in. That MIDI can do a couple of different things. We can send commands, okay, but what we can also do as well is we can play the drums. And there is a rhythm section in here, of course, as you've heard it before. So if we just go to here, there we go, rhythm section. And if we can tap the tempo, if you hold this down, you can very quickly get to the menu of the rhythm, and you can go in and change what it is. We've got variations, so we've got a variation for each beat, and I've gone into this. I've done videos about this. But one thing you can do is you can actually, by default, most companies actually put rhythm sections as MIDI channel 10. So if you just get this out of the box, then MIDI channel 10 is where all the rhythm beats are and how you trigger them. So I've done a video where you've got the there's a little sort of 16 pad pad. Why the name is escaping me, I cannot remember, but there we go. Where you can actually, the Synodo tempo pad, there we go. I knew we'd get there in the end. The Synodo tempo pad, where I actually plugged it into the RC-600, and then someone instantly said, can you do this on a 500? And yes, you can. So you can actually do that. But let's just say you don't want the whole drum kit, but you do want a kick drum. So we can actually use one of these. So what we can do is we can actually say boom, 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 and just hit it. But we need to change what this does. And the great thing is you can actually do that and just like click it in. And then what you can do is with the memory, we can go into the assign. So let's do this now, assign 1. So instead of being CC number 80, which is this, that's the same. So that is CC 80. We have to tell it what the source is. Sorry, let me do that. So the source is CC 80, and that is CC 80, and that's fine. But what we can do is we can do moment, but the target we can actually change. So we can actually do, we've got track 1, we've got track 2, we've got all these different things, and we can actually go over to all these different bits and bobs. But we've actually got rhythm play, we've got different parts, and then you've got CC numbers again. So what we can do is we can actually go into this and say, well, I want CC 80 to trigger something else. So you can actually do this where we can trigger different parts and different processes. I haven't got the place where we can do this right now, but there we go. But you can do that where we could just literally have a kick drum, just literally that, or kick and snare, and you could do it that way if you wanted to. That way it just expands again the functionality of this, and then get that down as on the loop, which is cool. The other part of this that people don't talk about a lot is the effects. So we've got effects that are built into them. There is loop effects, which means it's going to affect the loop, not the input. However, when you go into this and we have a quick look, you do have a slight effect, which is on the microphone or on the stuff here. So what we can do is, there we go. We have a noise suppressor. So the noise suppressor is also what can sometimes limit the sound of the voice. So if I was to turn this all the way down now, then you're going to hear everything. You're going to hear maybe a little bit of background noise, maybe if there's a hiss in the background or shh from the guitar amp or something like that. So if you bring this up, what it does, it's not about when you're talking, it's about when you're silent. And it'll start suppressing the noise at a certain volume. You've got the same for the instruments as well. So if you have got like a noisy amp, you could probably maybe get rid of that a little bit. It's a little bit like a limiter, sort of. But what we can do is we can actually go into track effects. So what we can do is, in order to do this, we need to change stuff fundamentally, and we need some loops down. So again, I'm just going to put a couple of loops down.
Bum ba-dum, 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 bum ba-dum.
Okay, so we've got 2 loops with multiple overdubs over the top. And then what we're going to do is we're going to have a play around with the effects. So there are a couple of little effects on here. So if we go into the controls, I'm going to have to change these controls and turn the effects on. So what we can do is we go into here, we can actually go loop effects on or off, and then you've actually got the options for changing what the effects are. So if we go into my brain's gone, there we go, memory, loop effects. So loop effects at the moment, loop effects is off, but it's available to be on these two. So if you go into each one of these, you'll see loop effect on for track 1 and 2. You can see that there, it says on just there, and that's by clicking these buttons. But then if we go into memory and then we go across to loop effects, give it a click, it says loop effects off. It means it's not being applied. So you could have maybe the effects on track 1 but not on track 2 when you apply them. So if we go on, we can have different type of effects. We've got repeat, we've got repeat 1, repeat 2, repeat 3, shift 1, shift 2, vinyl flick. We've also got scatter. Sorry, I forgot about the scatters. So let's start with this. So that's scatter 1, scatter 2. Scatter 3. So that's scatter 4. That's repeat 1. Repeat 2 is like a reverse repeat. Repeat 3. This is shift 1. Yeah. And that's vinyl flick. I quite like that, it's cool. Now, the thing as well is with these effects, they are obviously at 32-bit, so they're not sort of like really grainy or 8-bit sounding or anything like that, unless you want that, of course. Now, that is actually just turning them on and off as we see fit in here. But the great thing you can do is you can actually then adjust this. So we could say, well, I want this to be an effect on 1 and 2 on the buttons. So you could change the buttons over so the effects are there. Now, are the effects useful? I think they are, and it depends on what you're doing. It depends on the sound that you want. I quite like things like the repeats. So you could hold it down. Maybe you could keep the button momentary, and you've got something going dun 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. You could like literally make something quite creative. It depends on what you need, though, as I say, and it depends on the style of your music. Maybe you don't want a vinyl flick, maybe you do want a vinyl flick. It's totally up to you. But the effects are there, they are built in, but what, as I said before, you could have it where the effect goes on, but it only affects track 1, it doesn't affect track 2, or the other way around, or both. So effects are available on the RC-500. Just be aware they are loop effects, so if you do turn them on, it's not going to affect the input, it's not going to affect the guitar or the synthesizer you bring in, it's just affecting the loop. Right then. One thing I wanted to talk about actually was, let's just get rid of all that, is the rhythm. Now the rhythm, what you can do, of course, is you can use the rhythm independently of the 2 tracks. But what you can do in the settings is you can actually record the rhythm into here. Now, why would you want to do that when you've got a separate rhythm? Well, you might want to use things like the effects and start messing around with them. Or you might just want to use one as a loop. So when you go into... I've got to remember this now. Yeah. Brain's gone. Where are you? That's where it is. I think. I'll find it. But basically what you can do is you can actually change it Someone's going to tell me now. There it is. It's in input. So in input, what you can do, I knew I'd seen it somewhere. What you can do is in input, if you scroll through, you start with phantom power. Let me just put the hand there. There you go. You start with phantom power, then you've got mic in, then you've got instrument in, and then you've got rhythm. Now, rhythm by default is out A and B. And then what you can do is you can actually have it as loop. So you can have it just going out to the PA, or you could have it maybe, I only want to go to output B because output A is my amp, and that would sound really weird. Or you can have it as loop, or you can have it as off, like completely off. So when it goes to loop, then what you can do is you can actually record that into one of these two loops, one of these two tracks. And that's kind of handy, as I say, because you can actually record it and then you can control the rhythm as a loop as opposed to actually controlling it separately. Of course, these buttons, like the on-off button, you could have it here, so you could actually have it on-off, or you could have it as an FS6 or an FS7. But it's totally, again, the phrase for this entire live stream is it's down to how you do it. It's down to how you want it. So you can have this as a rhythm track as a loop, or you could have the rhythm track completely separately. I tend to have it personally as a completely separate rhythm track. So I have it as it's the rhythm. It's not got anything to do with the loops itself. Reason for that is because I want to turn it off and on independently and still have those two loops available. So it totally is down to how you want it to be. Where was that question? I want to make sure I've read the question correctly. Talk amongst yourselves while I'm looking for this question. But what we're going to do is, there we go. Yeah, we talked about start and stopping. And then the signal for recording the loop. Yeah, obviously low, so we've talked about that. Yes, there we go. So this was about a month ago, so it was a request as I'm reading this out, so this is not my words. Authority on about RC-500, blah, blah, blah. Could you please put together a video of how to put the RC-500, the Morningstar MC6 II Pro, and the CMW WIDI jacks together? Now, I've already done a video about the Morningstar MC8, and it's exactly the same process. The only difference is with the Morningstar MC6 Pro, or 2 Pro as it were, it has a couple of extra options which are quite nice, and they've expanded the functionality, so you've got things like 32 sends as opposed to 16 sends per button press, which is crazy. So you could have, obviously, you may not have just this, you may have a load of other pedals that are MIDI based, you may have delays, you may have obviously amp simulators. And what Morningstar can do is the Morningstar can basically talk to them all if they're MIDI. They can also talk to them if it's not MIDI, which is really, really clever, by using things like sending commands depending on what you're doing. Kevin, good afternoon. How are we? And hi to everyone. There we go. So basically by using things like the Morningstar with this is obviously just a very simple version. Obviously you've got 3 buttons here. We can program these up. You've got extra functionality. The Morningstar is kind of this on steroids. The whole Morningstar range, they are dedicated to obviously building things like MIDI controllers. However, 2 things. So if you're using things like the WIDI jack, like I've got obviously here, plugged in at the back, it needs to be obviously talking to it via Bluetooth. So you'd need another one at the other end. So I would plug things like this. So I'd have a WIDI jack here, and then this one, the WIDI master, would be in the back of the Morningstar. But the Morningstar still needs power. So you still need to actually have it plugged in, or I've actually even plugged it into things like a battery pack before now. So you can do things like that. I'm going to have a little bit of background music while I'm talking. There we go. So you can still use that. So you can plug things in, like obviously like the Morningstar into a battery. But if you've got it on your pedal board, however, and it's all plugged in, that's great. You might not need the Bluetooth one. The Bluetooth one obviously is very handy for less cables. But then also at the same time, if you've got it on a pedal board, you may just want to literally use a MIDI cable. Like your old school sort of 5-pin MIDI cable to go into it. But you can put these things together, no problem at all. And I've done a couple of videos. So for that reason and that reason alone, the Morningstar is a powerhouse when it comes to MIDI, and you can look at basically putting these things together to control everything. So you can press one button on the Morningstar and it'll send, well, the MC6 2 Pro will send up to 32 different commands on one button press. So you could get to a chorus, press a button press, and then your delay changes, your chorus changes, your looper stops, everything changes or starts, whatever you want to do. So there's loads of different options there. So I just wanted to address that, but also I would say obviously go and watch the review of the MC8 because we actually pair it with this and a couple of different loopers as well, and then go and have a look at the MC6 one as well. So that's it. Now I get a question about, there's a video I did which is the Boss RC rhythm converter, and the question is, does it work with the RC-500? And the answer unfortunately is no, and there is a valid reason for that though, and the valid reason is that the RC rhythm converter is actually there for the 505 and the 600, and you can create your own beats, and it churns it into an SMF file, standard MIDI file. And then you can import it, but you can't do that on the 500 or the 5 or the I don't think you can do it on a 202 as well. But the advantages you've got is with the 500, you've actually got a completely different system when it comes to rhythms. So if we hold this down, and I'll have to cover this so it covers it. A strange thing, if I don't cover it, it goes lighter. It's down to the exposure, and I can't lock it on this for some reason. Anyway, moving on very quickly. So we've got a reverb, obviously, for the rhythm section. We've got the level as well, and then you've got the pattern. Each pattern has a variation, so you have an A and a B, and it's worth going through them. I've actually gone through quite a few of them. I even did one with the 600 where we did a video. It was over 2 hours long, and it was every beat. But it has a variation, and if you press a button to say change the variation, it can even put things a fill in for you. So variation change, you can say a measure or at the loop end. So if at the end of the loop, when you press it, at the end of the loop, it'll do a little fill and it'll change. You've got the kit, and we've got loads of different kits, starting with the studio kit right through to the 808 909 kit and everything in between. And then we've got the beat. What beat is it going to be? It's going to be 4x4. 4x4, JP. 4/4. Anyway, what are we going to do with the rhythm? So at the start, it's going to be at loop start, or is it going to be record end, or before loop? Now, these are really cool, and these are really cool options. So loop start is I start the loop, it starts the tempo. Simple as that, unless I've got it switched off, which I have right now. If I had it like that and it's ready to go and armed, if I start a loop, it'll start for me. Simple as that. The other option is record end, and this is cool. So what we can do is we can record something, it doesn't play, and at the end of the recording, it kicks in. So maybe you want to do an intro with your guitar, and then you record that intro, which is the chords, and then as we go like into it, like verse 1, the rhythms start, and that's quite cool. I quite like that idea. And then the other one, which I've shown before, which is really clever, is before loop. Before loop, what you do is you press the looper, and it doesn't record. It starts the rhythm. So you press this, and it goes dun, 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 and you've got an intro, and it starts playing, and it'll just keep rolling around until you press this a second time. And I'm going to show you this as an example. But you can actually, and before loop means literally before you record the loop. So therefore, you'll have a little bit of a drum beat intro, which is quite nice. And then you can record, and then it'll just carry on. Then after that, why did I do that? Anyway, there we go. So there's the options. Loop start, record end, and before loop. And then you've got the stopping options. The stop is loop stop, so when the loop stops, it stops. Or you've got off, so it doesn't stop at all when you press this, and that makes it independent. Or you've got record end, again, so you can either stop it with the loop, not stop it with the loop, so then you'd need a separate button to stop it, or bend down and press that button. Or you've got record end. So I'm just going to have it as loop stop at the moment, just for now. And then, I didn't mean to do that. There we go. And then what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to go to this one and show you before loop. Before loop is really, really cool. So let's do before loop. Let's turn it on so it's ready. And let's press this button. Now, it's got this really strange graphic. I don't know if you can see that there. I don't think you can. Where it looks like a load of lines. And this is flashing away. It's just playing. It's not recording a loop. It's armed and ready. And it's waiting for me now. It's waiting for me to actually do a loop. And so we're going to go and make a loop. Bum, bum, ba-da-da-dun, dun, bum, 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 ba-da-da-dun, dun, bum, 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 ba-da-da-dun, dun, bum, bum, bum. There we go. Now, I didn't actually time myself because it ended up being in the middle of the bar there. So, you have to time yourself and make sure you get it right. But the process is really, really cool. Let me just delete that and we'll start that again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Dun, dun, da, 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 dun, 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 da, da, dun, dun, da, 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 there we go. Dun, dun, da, da. And then as I stop it, it stops. Now, you may have heard some phasing from this, and that's because what I've done is I've set the output to be record the loop. Let me just show you this as an alternative. So I'm not going to sing anything. I'm going to hit this again, which is before loop, and then I'm going to hit it again, and it'll record, but it'll record the drums. Ready? And... I'm going to turn the loop off. I'm going to turn the rhythm off, sorry. Turn the rhythm off. That's still playing, and it's actually recorded the rhythm into the loop. Now, it's whether you want that or not, and like you can do that. So if we go into input, there it is, rhythm. Oh, sorry. If we go into input, rhythm, loop, if obviously we turn around and say no, just A and B, then it's only going to set it out. It's not going to record into here. So there we go. And it's not actually recording anything. So if I arm this now. Dun, 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 dun. Now if I press stop, the rhythm stops because I've told it to do that. If we go into rhythm and hold this down, we've got obviously options for both the start and the stop. So the start is set as before loop, so it's going to give us a little bit of an intro before I record a loop, which is great. And then you've got stop loop. As I say, you've also got things like record count, and you can have a record count. So we can say record count for one measure. So now, if I hold this down, let's go 1, 2, 3, 4. There we go. Hang on a second. Oh yeah, that won't work if you've got before loop. Just remembered that. So let's do before loop. No, let's go loop start. There we go. Fine. And then what we're going to do is we're going to hit this. Ba, ba, bam, ba, da. Did you hear that? Like it just had like a ting, like just a little 1, 2, 3, 4. So if I press this now. Bum bum ba da da dun dun ba da bum bum ba da da dun dun ba da. That's a really good option if you're feeling a little bit unfamiliar or a little bit less confident about getting the loop right on. It gives you basically gives you a 1, 2, 3, 4 to get you going, which is really, really clever, really handy. And again, just a feature just to help you get your rhythms in. So that does not kick in if you've got the starters before loop, because it doesn't matter, because before loop it's going to start the rhythm anyway. Now, as I said to you before, each rhythm's got a variation. So if we were to just start the loop, there's our variation B for this option. There's variation A, and we could change this. So this button, for example, or this button changes the variation. So if we go over, we can add a fill. Well, the fill is on, and we have different parts. Let me just stop this for a second. So the great thing about this is, obviously, as I said before, the whole point of this was, can the RC rhythm converter work with this? And the answer is no, because the way this works is it has, if we scroll all the way down, you'll see parts, part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this on. I'm going to turn each individual part on and off. And there we go. All 4 parts are off now, but it is actually still going. So part 3 is the hi-hats. Part 2, snare. Part 1, kick drum. Part 4 is off. What is it? Ah, crash. There we go. So we can actually adjust these parts, and you can change the tone, low tone and high tone as well. Again, really, really useful in an environment where you go into a pub. It's boomy. It's really sort of like a bass heavy. You could change maybe the rhythm, low tone. You could pull it down a little bit, or maybe bring the highs up, whatever you want. So let's just go over where we've got the variations. I'm going to press play or start, and then I'm going to change the variation in between the beats, so therefore you should hear a fill. Ready? There you go. And there's absolutely loads to go through. So if you're actually going through this and then went to there's simple beat, that's simple beat 1. You got simple beat 1, there's absolutely loads. There's groove, there's funk, there's shuffle, there's swing, there's side kick, there's percussion, there's Latin, there's bossa, conga, samba, dance beats, and then simple metronome and blank. Blank is literally nothing. So nice little metronome. And then, of course, with each one of these, you can turn parts 1, 2, 3, 4 and off. Now, just be aware with things like this, for example, conga 2. Let's have a look. All 4 parts are on, but it's only just that bit. That's it. So if we go to variation, maybe I should have this as my sort of hold music. Anyway, moving on. So we've obviously got all these different parts, and then, as I said before, we've got the low tone and the high tone to finish that off. And the great thing is you can customize that. I would highly recommend, if you're going to use the rhythm section, to dedicate a button to it, even if it's if at least one. So one to start and stop the rhythm section, and maybe the other one to go over to the different one. So you can go over to part B or variation B. Now, what's really clever is I know someone who actually does this, where they're actually using part A, and when they press track 2, so you're doing a verse and a chorus, you're doing it in single mode as opposed to multi-mode, then what you can do is you can actually use an assign and say, by the way, switch over variation. So that's really clever, because then if you're going over to the chorus, the variation kicks in automatically. So that stops you from having to have another button, and then that way you can just use the variation. So the way to do that is the source would be track 2 play, or track 2 play and record, whatever it is, and then the target is variation B, and then variation change. Okay, and that's a really, really clever way of utilizing the rhythm section, and then you don't have to go, oh, press that button and then I've got to record it. You just press record on track 2. You're going into your chorus, and then the beat stays with you. You get a nice little fill, and then away you go. So a really, really clever way of doing that. Right then, so this live stream is sponsored. It's sponsored by our friends over at DistroKid. DistroKid is a music distribution company. So if you're looking to actually get your music out there for 2023 and into 2024, we can help you with that. So if you want to get your music on Spotify, Apple Music, Deezer, Pandora, Tidal, there's loads of different ones out there. And also on social media sites as well. So you can get it onto things like Facebook, on Instagram, on TikTok. You can actually use your music as for your reels. And other people can as well. You could go viral, for example, with a track that you're releasing. Then instead of actually charging you one price for every single piece of music you bring out there, DistroKid charge you one price per year. So it's an annual subscription. So it's normally $22.99. That's the starting option. There's a couple of different tiers. And with our link that's in the description box, it's also that link just there. It's also the QR codes that you can see on the screen. You can get 7% off your first annual membership. Now, by clicking on them, that helps the channel. Thank you very much to DistroKid for that. But also, it helps you because, as I said to you before, how much is a pack of strings these days? How much was your coffee this morning? How many coffees did you buy in a month? Well, for less than $22, you can release as much music as you want to for the entire year, right up to September of 2024. And then the other thing as well is they have a couple of different tiers, as I said. So I'm on the Musicians Plus option, which is $39.99 a year, and you get 7% off that. There's also a label option, which you can get 7% off that. The reason I use the other one is because I have two different outfits. There's me as John Paul and me and my colleague as Tokyo Wasteland. And then also, even if you don't have a second outfit, it's worth doing, I think, because you can schedule the date of the release. You can also schedule the pre-order date as well. I think that's really cool. And then obviously you've got a couple of things like uploading lyrics and stuff as well. DistroKid have so many different things when you get into it, when you go behind that sort of into your account. There's so many different things you can do. There's loads of promo cards. You've got the hyperfollow page. If you're in a band, you can split the payment so many different ways. Or if you're doing it with an agency, you could split it to them, whatever you're doing. So scan the QR code, click the link in the description box, and have a look at DistroKid. It is pretty much the easiest way to release music, and it's never been a better time to release music. You can release as much as you want to for less than $22 a year. So thank you very much to DistroKid for sponsoring this live stream. That QR code has been there the entire time. It's that one. Whoa, overcooked it. There, that one right there. So you can obviously scan that QR code anytime you see fit. I know a couple of people have done that already because I get told when you scan it, which is quite good. And then obviously, thank you very much to DistroKid, and thank you very much if you do obviously click the link and scan it, and because that helps me out as well and it helps the channel. If you are finding this information really useful, then that's great. But what I'd really be happy with is if you could, underneath this video, there'll be a thumbs up. If you can give that a thumbs up, and that pushes it out to more people, and obviously helps people get this information, helps my channel, helps me, but also it means that people are getting more out of this than ever before, which is fantastic. Right, now, there was another comment that I wanted to cover today. If you've got any questions, obviously, regarding looping, like how to loop, what I use, what should I use, I'm never going to tell you what you should use. I'm always going to show you the pluses and the minuses for each thing, and then it's up to you to choose that. However, obviously, if you want some help, want some advice with that, that is what Loop Lab Mondays is all about. And I hope, obviously, this is giving you some kind of great value. So, it was that one, wasn't it? Now, there we go. Can you set the rhythm to a slow tempo to work right with a slow song on the RC-500? I tried and had trouble with the tempo. The tempo was 65 and it didn't sound right. Now, there's two things here, basically. One is, obviously, you can set the tempo. And what I would do in that scenario is I would certainly use the rhythm section to help you. Certainly if we're going slower, it's really difficult. And it's one of these things where, oh, Eric, thank you. I have the same one, the RC-500, and is why I watch your channel. So helpful. Thank you. You're more than welcome. Thank you. That's really, really nice to hear. Thank you. Well, if you've obviously been watching right from the beginning, great. If you haven't, after this live stream will become a live stream video on a replay. We've got some great tips and tricks for the RC-500 there as well. But I'm going to show you, obviously you can watch them. And this one was all about basically slowing things down. And it's harder. No matter what you're doing, if you ask any drummer, it's harder to play a slower beat than it is to play a faster beat. But what we've got is, if you've got something pre-recorded and you try and slow it down, you're going to start hearing some weird sounds. Let's just put something down. Yeah, I need to turn that off. So, one sec. Record count off. There we go. Right. It would really help if I set this up properly. Right, hang on a minute. There we go. We're all human. We all make mistakes. There we go. Right. Now we've got everything going, and I've just realised I didn't put the RC-500 on the screen, so you just watch me do that loop and go boo. So just to catch everyone up, obviously I'm using this, which is the FS1WL. This is my all start stop. There we go. So this is now at a tempo of 134.2, as you can see right there. If I cover that, for some reason the screen's fine. But if I give that a tap, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to tap this once, and now I can either tap tempo this, or I can tap this once and then use the dial, or you can even use an expression pedal as well. But let's just play it and just have a listen to what it sounds like. There we go. Sounds weird, right? And the thing is, it's going to, and it's always going to sound that kind of weird, warbly, people call it warbly sound. The reason for that is because what you're doing is you're asking the looper to actually make it slower, which is more time, but it doesn't have anything in between the bits where, imagine stretching it out with a string, and we stretch it out like that, and then you've got the audio, and the pieces of audio get stretched out, and there's gaps in between those pieces of audio. So what it does is it duplicates it. So you got da 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 da. So it's doing that. It's actually repeating those little slices. Imagine slicing the audio up and then stretching it out. There'd be gaps, so it just goes, well, copy and duplicate that one, and that's what happens, and that's where that sound comes from. Now, for vocals, sometimes it's basically sounds worse than if you're doing it for kick drum and snare, depending on if you're doing beatboxing and things like that. If we go the other way, it doesn't sound too bad, because all we're doing is we're taking bits of the original audio out so we can squeeze it. So go faster. Okay, so what's happening there is all it's going to go, well, I've got this piece of audio and you want it to be faster, so I've got to squeeze it. So what I'm going to do is just remove parts or make those parts quicker. Or play it at a faster rate. Whereas obviously if you slow it down, you slow it right down, then what happens is it's taking bits of audio and going, well, I haven't got anything to play with here, so I'm just going to have to stretch this out, or copy that over. So you go da-da, as opposed to da, you just go na 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 na. Always knock things, don't I? So it's making a choice to do that, and that's the audio engine inside the RC-500, the 600, things like that. And the audio engine is making that choice to actually chop it up in a certain way. Now, if you are doing things like you want things at half speed for like a breakdown, you're going to have to make some creative choices. So whether you want it to, obviously, if I again play this, if you hold down, by the way, there we go, we're back to 134.2. Like, nice little tip for you. If you've been messing around with the tempo, if you tap tempo and then you hold it down, then what it does when you let go, you'll see it flash red like really, really, really quickly. And then what it does is it goes back to the original tempo. So if I give that a click, there you go, 134.2. So if I then go, cool, like we're rocking and everything else, and then I just want to break it in half, like I do that. And again, you can set a button to be that if you wanted to. So as you hold it down, then it's the equivalent of pressing that button. But it's up to you what you want to do with it. Again, this entire live stream is about up to you and how you want to play it. All of these things are choices depending on how you use it. But there are people saying, oh, it sounds warbly when I start messing with it. And it's just the audio engine and how that works. There are other loopers out there. Obviously, we're talking about the RC-500 today. I've got it in front of me. But there are other loopers out there. Things like Loopy Pro. Loopy Pro on the iPad has a different audio engine and can handle things in a slightly different way. So you get less warbling, but you will still get it if you're going to like get it half the sound, or even like go to a quarter, like literally like ×8 or things like that. So ×4, ×8. So you have to choose and think about what you're going to do regarding that. It's like, is it worth dropping it down, or is it worth actually in the breakdown just turning the loop off? Not changing the tempo whatsoever, and then playing like just with yourself, the guitar, whatever, the synthesizer, whatever you're using, and then at the right moment just bring it back in at the right tempo. It's totally up to you. I'm saying that a lot on this live stream, but it really is, and it's all creative choices. But you can change the tempo of something that's been recorded. Just be aware that when you do that, it's going to obviously make a choice of the sound. Certain sounds will sound no problem. Bass sounds sound weird because, of course, it's tuning it. And it's trying to keep the pitch as well. You'll notice it doesn't change the pitch when we change the tempo. Put it back to where it is. So there we go. So if you hold that down for 2 seconds and then let go, and what it'll do is it'll actually go back to the original tempo, he says. There we go. I just wasn't holding it down long enough. But yeah, it's whether you want to actually make that choice or not. Now, the great thing is what you can do is one of the options, if I remember correctly, on here with tempo, is tempo up and tempo down is one of the targets you can do on assigns. So you can actually do tap tempo, tempo up, tempo down, or just tempo, and then it clicks it in to control the tempo. So if you've got things like a morning, so you've got like 8 more pedals on MIDI, you could have it where one of them is tempo up, tempo down, or you could have a button that actually changes the tempo and actually have a specific tempo type, which is really, really clever. You could obviously do that, no problem. And then, of course, it's whether you want to turn. The great thing is that the rhythm section will actually be the same sound. So if we if I bring this right down again, stop that. It's the same quality sound, it's just being played because it's MIDI, and it's just telling it to play the MIDI notes at a certain point. That's it. So it depends on what you want to do. But I'm going to try and stop saying that, but it really is. It really does. So Eric says, So it looks like I need to buy a foot pedal for more buttons. It's amazing how much you can do with the 500. It really is. And I think it's one of those things, I've had these comments before where they're like, oh, you always use the 600. I use this live. I use this when I go out to like open mic nights. It's a nice little thing. I actually have it in the Boss little pedal little pedal board thing. Let me show you. I have it in this little BCB 30 thing, jobby. So in here, you can actually see I've cut out where the RC-500 goes, and then what I do is that is actually where the FS7 pedal goes, and then I've just got enough room to stick this in my bag, and then I've got up to 5 different pieces. I've got up to 5 different additional buttons if I really want it. Sometimes I'll just go out with just the 500 and an FS7 pedal. Now the only difference between an FS7 an FS7 and an FS6 is just they are the same pedal really. It's just that the design. The FS6 pedal is obviously, in fact, there we go. So that's the FS6 pedal, obviously 2 buttons, button A and button B, and then you can plug it in by a single port there. It does need a battery, so there's a battery inside. And then the FS7 pedal is just a really small version of that, but instead of having the buttons dedicated to be separate, they're on top of each other. So you have to be a bit more careful with the FS7, but I've kind of got used to it, which is really good. Do you need a PC for it to work? What do you mean? You don't need a PC for this to work. No, absolutely not. So are you talking about this? Are you talking about the FS1WL? Because you can actually, there's an app. You can actually get an iOS and Android app, turn it on, and then what you can do is you can actually set what the CC number is for each 3 of these. Then you've also got what the CC number is for this, and then you can also do expression as well. So yeah, you need at minimum, you need a smartphone, but you can actually set it up through a PC or Mac. You don't need a PC or Mac. I run on Mac, so I don't run on PC. Yeah, it's a great little setup. And the thing is, obviously, if I'm just doing stuff, I haven't got any effects, as in input effects, on this itself. And I could obviously, get my TC Helicon, and that's what I used to have. Was literally that was on one side, the TC Helicon was on the other, and I used to do that with the RC-30, which is sitting in the cupboard crying. And you do that and go out with gigs just like that. Before that, I was using the Headrush. The Headrush E2, which was made by Akai, which is Katie Tunstall's pedal. It's not actual Katie Tunstall's pedal. That'd be amazing, but it's the one that she uses. And believe me, she still uses it. I can't believe it. But yeah, so I used to use that, so I had a lot of effects going in, and you got 2 tracks, and that's it. But then, if I just want to do a bit of looping and don't want to add any more effects on, this is a great option. The RC-500 is a powerhouse, and if you just need 2 tracks and a little bit of a rhythm section, that's it. That's what you've got. No problem. Obviously, if you want to pick up a RC-500, then of course I've got loads of links in my videos on the RC-500 to go and pick one up. Again, they are affiliated links. That helps me. But it is a great setup for doing gigs. It really is. And it's a nice little setup. You can just take it and then go, thank you. And you've got your guitar and that, and that's it. And then microphone. Nice little setup. There we go. Right then. So this is Loop Lab Mondays. Loop Lab Mondays is all about asking questions about looping, but of course you can ask any question you want to. And we do this every Monday, or as many Mondays as we can fit in, unless I'm on holiday or there's something going on. But Loop Lab Mondays is always there. Now, if you have missed this session and you have obviously watching this on the replay and you're like, I wanted to ask JP a question, put it under this video. This will be a video available for replay right from the very beginning, and you'll be able to obviously ask me any questions. And what I do is I take those questions and I'll put them in next week's show, which is going to be next Monday, which I can't for the life of me remember. Is it the 18th? Yes, 18th at 4 p.m. UK time, and then we'll do 4 till 6, and then we'll answer any questions that you've got about looping. It doesn't have to just be about one specific thing. I thought we'll talk about the RC-500, get a lot of questions about the 500. And finally, do people want I do courses, and I do for example, this course, which is Master the Basics, where you can still get 20% off until tomorrow morning. And I did actually have the code set for expiring on the 3rd of September, but I extended it because people asked me to. So that is going tomorrow morning, UK time. So if you want 20% off Master Basics, put the code 20k subs in. So I do a course like that, and I did a course all about the RC-600. It's huge. It's a huge course. However, I'm starting to get the feeling that people want a course about this. Do people want a course about the RC-500 and how to use it? If you do, then please put it in the comment section and say, yes, give me the course. And I will. I'm looking about the idea of building a course for the RC-500, because I think it is so in depth, and people don't realize how in depth it is. And we're going to be doing this course and making. Well, I think I'm pretty much certain I'm going to be doing this course. I just want to make sure people want it. Because it's a lot of work to make a course, and obviously I want to make sure that it's something that people want. So if you do want the course, let me know in the comment section below, and also if you're in the chat, obviously let me know there as well. And we are going to wrap up today, obviously for Loop Lab Mondays, but thank you very much if you've joined us, and if you have got a question, as I say, put it in the comment section just underneath, and we'll put it in next week's show. And as always, stay safe, and we will speak to you next week. Bye-bye.